Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Trudy LPC, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Self-Aware and Effed Up podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Mercedes Hickman, and she is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Georgia. I'll be speaking with Mercedes in this week's episode about crisis intervention and how to navigate dealing with a relative or family member, as well as friends who may be experiencing suicidal thoughts or may be experiencing a mental health emergency. Make sure you guys stay tuned. Make sure you continue to follow me, Trudy LPC, on all social media platforms. We're also going to be spending some time today talking about self-care. So please stay tuned, guys. You guys do not want to miss this episode. It's going to be off the charts, I promise. Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Trudy LPC, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Self-Aware and Up. I want to, first of all, start out by saying thank you for all of the support that you guys have shown so far. I really love the feedback that I'm getting from you guys, and I just really wanted to show my appreciation and gratitude to you guys for all of the support so far. But this week's episode is going to be absolutely amazing as well. I have a guest with me. Her name is Mercedes Hickman, and she's going to be talking with us a little bit about crisis work, counseling, as well as travel. She does a lot of different things here in the Atlanta area. And so she's going to be sharing a lot of those things with you guys. She is originally born in Atlanta, but raised in St. Louis. So she's always, she's going to share a little bit about her history, her background. So welcome to the show, Mercedes Hickman. Hey girl, how are you doing today?
Hey girl, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a day, but we're here and we're going to make it happen.
Definitely, most definitely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and to share with us a little bit about your background and what you do. So I know you are a licensed clinical social worker, and I know that you've been working in the crisis field, but I just want you to start out by telling the audience a little bit more about who Mercedes is and how you got into doing crisis work.
Okay. As Santry just mentioned, my name is Mercedes Hickman. I am a licensed clinical social worker. Just a little background. I currently right now I work with the Veterans Crisis Line as a supervisor for crisis responders. I've been with the VCL now for, I would say 5.5 years, but I think it's roughly been over 5.5 years now at this point. Like she said, I'm originally born here in Atlanta, but St. Louis is home. That's where I was raised.
It's here.
And I went to undergrad and received my BSW and bachelor's in social work at Southeast Missouri State University. Literally moved the day after I graduated undergrad.
Okay, where they do that at? You just moved the day after you graduated?
I did. I was like, I need a fresh start. I'm one of those people sometimes where I feel like if I've gotten everything that I needed from a place and it's time to move on. And I just felt like St. Louis provided me, it was my childhood. It provided me everything that I needed to grow and move on to better things, which so happened to be moving to Atlanta, graduating from Clark Atlanta University with my master's in social work as well. And then went on from there. So you asked me how I got into crisis work.
Yeah.
I think it was an accident. And it just was like a beautiful accident that I fell in love with.
How do you get into crisis work on accident?
So quick backstory. I knew growing up, I wanted to be a therapist. That was my passion, was to be a therapist. I wanted to work with children, just helping them heal from trauma and everything. Right. I did not know what I was getting myself into. So I got a taste of child therapy. I was working with a core agency here in Atlanta and more so in Decatur, to be specific. It's not greater. It's not greater. It was not greater. It was very challenging because I guess not realizing that being a child therapist, you have to work with the parents, and a lot of parents were hindering their children from being able to grow and heal the way that they needed to. So it kind kind of delayed the interactions that I had. Like it was a lot of inconsistency with the treatment. They were like, oh, they got in trouble today at school, so I want you to come out and talk with them. But then I wouldn't hear from them to meet their next scheduled appointments for weeks or months until they got in trouble again. You know what I mean? So it definitely made it difficult. And I was like, I don't think this is my niche. It's not. So I interned at Peachford Hospital.
Okay.
When I was getting my MSW, I was like, let me try it out. Let me try mental health out. I'm not.
Okay.
And I loved it. I was like, oh.
That's interesting. So you just started there as an internship and it became a part of your.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. I started out in the social work department. I wasn't a huge fan of it because you do the thing that I loved the most about doing the social work side at Peachford was the biopsychosocial assessments.
Okay.
But I wasn't a fan of doing group therapy. And again, and I feel like again at this moment, therapy is not for me. I was like, I don't like individual, I don't like group. That's not what I knew for years. This is what I wanted to do. And I was like, maybe this isn't the path I'm supposed to go, but I love doing the assessment part.
Wow.
So they offered me a job and I was like, yeah, no, I don't want it. So I went and I started working at the Georgia Crisis and Access Line.
How did you get there? Because I want to share a little bit about our history in terms of the crisis, Georgia Crisis and Access Line. But how did you end up going from Peachford to working at GCAL?
How did I go about getting that job? So I actually started at GCAL while I was still interning. Between classes and interning, I quit my full-time job to make sure I could finish school. But of course, doing like core agency work wasn't enough. I was getting paid once a month. I was making $700 here, $700 there. It was like, sis got a car note, I got rent.
He got bills, baby.
So GCAL was actually hiring part-time for overnight shift, and it would just happen to work for my schedule. So that's how I ended up there at GCAL.
Okay. Well, I'm personally grateful for your time at GCAL because one, that's how I met you on the lines, calling and putting my people on the board. But for the listeners, while I was working at the Bradley Center, which is a psychiatric hospital in Columbus, Georgia, I would call Mercedes over at the Georgia Crisis and Access Line to get people who were underinsured or uninsured placed on a board so that the state could actually help find them a bed, essentially a state-funded bed for a crisis stabilization unit. And so every night we both worked the night shift. I was at the hospital, she was at GCAL, and I would call in trying to get my people put on the board. And we kind of formed a relationship from there and ended up working together at the same organization later on. So you started at GCAL, and then tell us a little bit about, like, I guess, how that process works and how individuals who may have a family member that's in crisis, how they could use GCAL services for crisis situations.
So I can honestly say one thing good about Georgia is that they do have the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. It is built. Yeah, this one thing. But for dealing with people in crisis, I think it's a number. One is for the entire state of Georgia. You can call and if you feel like I need a referral for a therapist and I don't know where to start, you can start there. Yeah. If you're feeling like you're in a crisis, and you don't have anyone to talk to, you can call them. They're literally 24/7. And then sometimes you just need that unbiased opinion, that unbiased conversation with another person other than like your close friends or family members. And I think you can call into the crisis line. Another great benefit that the state of Georgia has, and a lot of other places don't, and I really hate it sometimes, but they have the mobile crisis unit. And so the mobile crisis unit is made up of, they're either licensed counselors or licensed social workers, and they actually come out to your home to do assessments and kind of help you determine the level of care that you need in that moment for your crisis. So that level of care can be inpatient treatment or giving you a referral to a therapist to get you an appointment to see someone, or just immediately taking you to the ER in that moment if it is an emergent situation.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know much about the mobile piece of it, honestly, until working with the Bradley Center and knowing about, I think it was Benchmark at the time that would come out and do assessments, and they would bring people into the ER, and I'd be like, why do y'all keep bringing these people in? You know, of course, the people would get there and they'd say something completely different from what their family members would say to the people with Benchmark or even with GCal. But I definitely appreciate you sharing that piece of how people can be a support to their family members. Do you still remember the number? I'm just curious.
I believe the number is 1-800-715-4225.
Look at you. Okay. That's it. I'll never forget it because I had to call y'all so much. Like, that number is embedded in my brain. But
you know what? I said that number the most when I worked at Peachford.
Wow. Yeah.
Same, and that's how I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a while to remember the 1-800-273-8255, which we know will be transitioning to 988 as of July 16th of this year. And so can you talk a little bit about 988 and kind of how you think that will impact the field of mental health and the help people get?
I'm sorry, guys, if you can hear my little rascal. But I think 988. I think it's going to be more simplified. I mean, you just said the phone number to the crisis line. You have to think about really being in a crisis and having to dial 1-800-273-8255. Like, that's a long number to remember. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think simplifying the number to 988 is the way for those in crisis or those in need to simply, I feel like it's their 911.
Yeah.
And we all know 911 is simplified. Can you imagine having to remember the non-emergency number in your area when you have an emergency?
Right. Yeah. It's definitely,
you know, it's quicker. Yeah. It's quicker to just dial 3 numbers. So I think it will be, I think it will be a more positive impact than anything.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I know that we've been kind of anticipating that change for the last couple of years with the Veterans Crisis Line. And I know you shared that, you know, you're supervisor for the Veterans Crisis Line. And so, like, is there anything special that you guys are doing to prepare for the possible influx in calls from people? Is there anything special that you guys are doing?
I'll be honest with you. It's so much stuff that we're doing that I really just can't keep up. More than anything, I know that we are actually hiring. We're doing a lot of hiring to prepare for the expansion. They are anticipating that there's going to be a large expansion and influx of calls. So we are doing a lot of hiring. We're implementing a lot more trainings. It's honestly, Centuries can probably answer that question better than I can, especially because I work overnight. So I feel like I get a lot of watered down information sometimes, or by the time information comes to me, I feel like sometimes, oh, they changed it. That's not it. It's, oh, no, that was for last week. It's for, you know, so I'll be honest, I'm bad with keeping up with it. I'm so bad.
I mean, I'm bad with keeping up with it these days, but I just know, like, I actually kind of found out online the actual final go live date because people were posting it, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, we probably kind of need to know this. But yeah, so I think it's great that they're simplifying it to 98 because it does give people a lot more access. And I think we will see an influx in the amount of people that do call, but it's like, we want you to call. That's what we're there for. As far as the rollout of 988, I know it will have some implications, but what would you say to, like, a family member of someone who is in crisis? Because I think how we even decided to talk about this topic was that there was an incident that happened in Atlanta, Georgia, and I believe it was at Fogo de Chao, where there was an individual who his mom called the crisis line for him, or called the local 911 for him, and they didn't come out, and that individual ended up leaving before local authorities or a mobile crisis could get there, and he ended up losing his life. What would you say to family members who have someone like that who may be in crisis? How could they support them in the interim while they're waiting for like mobile crisis or local authorities to come?
You know what? When you say mobile crisis, I'm gonna X them out for a hot second, only because I feel like people are so quick to dial 911. It's because that's all we know sometimes,
Right.
Like, I have an emergency. This is emergency. I need help for my child, and help. We've always been trained and taught to call 911. And I feel like if you have someone that struggles with any sort of mental health, I feel like the first thing you need to do is familiarize yourself with the actual resources in your area, because sometimes police won't respond. And as the culture that we're in today, this is not the first person that the police have killed who has had a crisis situation. So I think that's why I mentioned before, like GCAL having a mobile crisis team. A lot of people don't know that. So more than anything, start by familiarizing yourself. They don't have to be in a crisis at that moment, but have those numbers somewhere easily accessible for when you do need them. Especially before getting 911 involved. But also in that moment is just dealing with someone who has mental health issues as well. I'm hope I get them back to your question. I get off tangent sometimes.
It's okay. It's an ADD.
Right. But or the lack of sleep. But so so familiarizing yourself with the resources in your area is definitely number one in priority. When you, like I said, when you have somebody that is struggling, but what they are struggling in that moment, do your best to try to keep them calm. We find so many times where sometimes we involve so many people that are in crisis. Can you imagine, I don't know, feeling like your anxiety is on 10 and you have 6 people in your ear telling you, do this, do that, breathe, no, take a walk, oh, breathe in, breathe out. Like, you're making me worse. And the first thing I want to do is walk away. So if it's possible to get that one person with someone that they actually listen to, that they trust in that moment, if you're at home, get them into a space where it's just you and them, and you can actually focus that individual, and literally have a conversation with them. I say use comforting tones of voice, not yelling, not screaming, being condescending, and most of all, being dismissive.
Right. Now that's the one right there. Yeah. A lot of people do get dismissive when it comes to mental health issues in general.
Yeah, they really do. And so I always tell people, because they're like, oh, you're in a crisis because you don't have money, or you can't pay your bills, or you can't. And sometimes it's the simplest things that cause other people to go into crisis. I always tell people, what you feel is simple for you, it may not be simple for that next person. So you cannot judge that individual about what they consider to be their crisis.
Yeah.
And just support them the best way that you can. If you don't know how, yes, pick up the phone, utilize one of your resources. And also, I feel like involving 911, being very clear in what the situation is. Explaining, hey, this is a mental health call. I have this individual who's struggling with whether their diagnosis, you could tell them what's going on. They're irate, they're hallucinating, having delusions, anxiety on 10, I can't calm them down. Be specific so the police know what they're dealing with when they're coming out. The other part is, if you're going to involve the police, please, please, please remove any access to any type of weapons.
Say that again.
Seriously, like, please remove access to any sort of weapon. One thing, I have, my best friend is a police officer, and one thing with police officers, we always say, well, why couldn't they tase that person who was holding a knife? Well, police officers are trained to one up the weapon, right? So if the person has, let's say the person maybe has a stick, I can pull out a taser. But if you have a knife, I have to one up you and pull out a gun.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean? And if you have a gun, of course, I'm pulling my gun.
Right.
I have an uncle who is a retired marshal, but he was a police officer. And one thing that I know in St. Louis is, really think about the safety. Do you want to go home to your family? Because at the end of the day, they have families. So if I shoot, I'm shooting to kill, right? And I know that those are some things that St. Louis City police officers were taught years ago. I'm pretty sure I'm hoping it's changed now at this point, but some officers have been in the game so long that they still have this mentality. So you can't say, oh, he was having a mental health crisis, but yet he had access to a gun and he pulled it out on an officer.
Right.
So please, please, please remove any access. I don't care how big or how small it is. Remove any access that person may have.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be in that situation of shooting first and asking questions later.
Yeah.
And it's unfair.
Yeah. And I know it can be difficult as, a family member or a friend that's trying to remove something, especially when you're dealing with someone who may be psychotic, like they may be hallucinating, they may be, hearing voices, seeing things, or responding to internal stimuli. They may be having those experiences. It can be hard, especially like even if they're paranoid and they think that they need the gun or they need the knife for protection because someone's out to get them. It can be difficult in those situations. And, I think that it's great to say remove those things, but I know that that's not going to always be feasible for people.
Yeah, no, it's not always feasible. But again, it goes back to, if you're going to involve emergency service, let's be clear in what is accessible. What do they have? They have a knife right now, or they have a gun. That way, hopefully they're prepared to implement some type of de-escalation before approaching the victim or the patient or the cousin, the brother, or whoever.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's going to work 100% of the time, but let's be clear in our communication as far as what's going on. Because that young man in Georgia, that was a very unfortunate situation. I wondered, I just had this conversation. I wondered if they actually had the phone number to the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. I've wondered why dispatch didn't tell them, hey, we don't have officers to come out to you at this particular moment, but you can call the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. You know what I mean? Because we think about the situation where you called and you needed them to come to the home. That doesn't necessarily mean that Fogo de Chao and the air officers that were patrolling that area knew that this was the person that they were talking about.
Right. Yeah. I don't think they would have known that, I don't
Yeah,
think they would have had that information.
Yeah. So I think in that situation, I wish I knew the whole entire story, but I definitely feel like somewhere in there, dispatch failed that family. Because and then what did it say? PD ended up arriving like 2 hours late, right?
I'm not sure when they arrived, because to my understanding, it was a security guard at Fogo de Chao that ended up shooting the individual that was in crisis.
Yeah, they did. And they did it because they said he was acting unruly. It was his previous place of employment. And he again acting unruly. But that mom had to find out that her child was killed on the news.
Yeah, my heart goes out to her. Like that situation, it really, like reading about it really kind of messed me up, especially with us being in the field that we're in. Like it was a lot. And to find that out, especially when you call for help and you had that happen. And I know we've seen a lot of situations where, people have called the crisis lines and that type of situation has happened. on the lines before. There's
Yeah.
YouTube videos out there of a situation like that. I believe it was in like Louisiana somewhere. And so it's it's very distressing to
Yeah.
kind of know that those sort of things happen. But I think the tips that you shared, I think that those things can really be helpful in helping people understand what to do in a crisis situation and how they can advocate for their loved ones who may be experiencing a crisis when they're reaching out. I think those tools are really helpful. Now, I know you got into crisis work, on accident, and you stayed. What I mean, I know you fell into it, but what has caused you to stay in crisis work for the amount of time that you've been in crisis work?
It's literally something about being there helping somebody through their most vulnerable state. That I feel like it's gonna sound that makes my heart smile. It's like I mentioned, I worked at Peachford, but I was on the assessment side for the 5 years. Went at Peachford. I went back and worked at the assessment side, and so I absolutely love doing assessments. And so I'm seeing people literally at their worst, right? And I can walk the halls and go to the cafeteria or go on the hospital unit, and I'm looking at them like, dang, this is not the same person that I actually met just 3 days ago or even a day ago. Like it's something about it. It's just like, and knowing that that person is going to get help is something like, I'm saving a life.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we've saved every single life. But the ones that you do, those are the most rewarding ones. And it makes you realize, like, I know why I'm in this field. I know why I'm doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's actually very admirable. And I like the way that you worded that, like you're seeing people on the worst day of their lives. And I know for me, working in the ER for the 5 years that I worked in the ER and seeing people come in and out and, having to place them on 1013, which, for the audience are essentially, if you're in California, it's 5150, or Florida, it's Baker Act. But putting people involuntarily into the hospital for their own benefit and then having them side eye you because now, they were supposed to go to work the next day, but they can't, there's no, it's kind of like there's a balance of doing it. It can start to weigh on you over time, like doing that work day in, day out. How do you balance life, like working in the crisis field for as long as you have done? What are some things you do to bring balance to yourself in your life?
That is probably one of the hardest questions. Next to saying, tell me about yourself. That is probably one of the hardest questions. I mean, I feel like self-care is so important, but like you said, it sometimes it just weighs on you so much. I work out. I do work out. I work out about three times a week with a trainer. You guys hear my little whatever. But I laugh about that, but I'm one of those people is I have to pay for, if it's gonna cost for me to stay healthy mentally and physically, I'm gonna pay it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I end up paying a trainer, because as much as I want to say physically I want to look good, it's more of a mental thing for me to go and work out. You guys heard my little dog back here. That's I feel like I'm not gonna say he's my emotional support dog, but ooh, child, I wouldn't know where I'd be sometimes without him.
Yeah, I probably a letter, girl.
I probably do need a letter.
Okay.
So I have my dog, and I go hiking. I try to go hiking at least once a month. I get massages. Try to do some of this travel.
Okay.
Travel as much as I can. I would say that I didn't travel during the pandemic, but I was probably gone the most times during the pandemic. I was like, yeah. And then sometimes, to be honest with you, doing nothing. Nothing.
I look forward to doing nothing at times.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest moments. Just being able to chill.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's probably doing nothing is probably my favorite self-care thing. And when I say doing nothing, I mean, I'll sit in the house in silence, no TV, good old fashioned, probably grandma stuff where you clean the house, light some candles, and literally just sit in silence and do nothing. I mean, I read. So I have a lot of different things that I try to implement to keep myself sane. And then the most important thing that I can probably do is that this crisis work it's heavy. It's heavy on us mentally and emotionally. And when it's not in me, when I'm not feeling it, I'm sick.
Yeah.
And I use my sick days. People that are afraid to use their days, but it's like they're there, you earn them, use them.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely, relate to having to take those days off, because I remember our first year at the crisis line, the veterans crisis line. I can just remember how hectic it was on night shift and really being there and taking those calls back to back. Like, I never called out at any of my previous jobs before starting to work in crisis work, because it was one of those things where it's like, I can't talk to people tonight. I cannot help them if I'm not in a good mental space myself. And that was really a rewarding time to be able to help those type people. But some of those calls stick with you. I know I have some that just stick with me, and it's just like, I'm glad we were able to save their life, but it's just like it can stick with you. And I know before I took that job, I was really like, oh my God, what if someone takes their life while I'm on the phone with them? What if what if this happens? And I had to make up my mind before I started that we're there to serve as tools. We're there to help people in the worst moments of their lives, but we're not responsible for the choices they make. We can do everything we can, but sometimes there is going to be a loss of life. And I'm grateful that I never experienced that, but I've had to work with people who have had to experience that. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk about crisis work, because it's something we're both passionate about. And it's something that people don't really fully know about. And so I definitely hope that this episode is able to help people who are needing, who have relatives or are in situations where their loved ones are at risk, or whether it's of suicide or just a psychiatric emergency, if they're, experiencing psychosis and things. And so I really love that the number is there now for 988. 988 will be launching on July the 16th of 2022. So it'll be within the next 2 weeks, so that will be launching for everyone to be able to use. And it is for the entire United States. Anyone that's in the United States can call that number. The 1-800-273-8255 and 1-800-715-4225. Those numbers will still be active and for people who are still using it, but 988 will just make it so much easier. But you said some things and you shared some of your self-care tips, and I'm not going to let you leave without talking about your other life, and that is your business as a travel agent, Mellow Escapes. And I want you to share those things with people, because sometimes they may not be in crisis work, but we all can need a good vacation and we need to attend to our self-care. So please share with us a little bit about your business and how you can help people plan their next vacation in their next time of self-care.
Well, thank you for highlighting Mellow Escapes. You can we are on Instagram. It's Mellow Escapes with the S at the end, LLC. And that is the name on Instagram and Facebook, actually. But I'll get more interaction on Facebook. On Instagram, guys. I don't really know how to work Facebook business page. So difficult. You guys,
I'll give you that.
It is. It's not the most user friendly. So more traction on Instagram. So if you're looking to plan, whether I'm a specialize in Caribbean. Let me say that I specialize in Caribbean. I did cruises for a while, but because of the pandemic, and I'm not quite still comfortable with how they're getting back into business since the pandemic, post-pandemic. So I haven't added them back. I'm thinking about adding them back in 2023 to do cruises. I will see. I actually have clients right now on a Disney cruise that they have been planning for 3 years. So depending on how their review is, I add it back by the end of the year, but as of right now, I'm not doing cruises, just strictly Caribbean. If you have questions about in-state travel, you can message me and I will do my best to answer them. But I always find that it's cheaper for you guys to book your trips. Like you say, I want to go to Vegas. I'm not booking Vegas. It's literally so much cheaper. I could be that agent that takes your money.
Right.
I can
I
make
appreciate
money,
you not being that person.
yeah, but I'm like, I want things to actually be feasible for you guys, and taking a trip. So if you're looking to go to Mexico, my favorite destination, Jamaica,
Hey,
or anywhere in the Caribbean, just, hit me up. Like I said, Instagram, it's Mellow Escapes LLC. I do have a website. It is mellowescapes.com. And you can go on there, request a travel quote. I do have some trips on there. I have a couple last minute trips on there. My goal is to get better at creating trips just for people who don't know where they want to go, and they can go on the website and say, oh, this sounds interesting. I am in the process of working at adding Africa to my destinations.
I might have to hit you up about that.
So
I'm here for that.
So 2023, I'm thinking September 2023. I'm actually working with someone right now to finalize some details. I'm not even saying finalize because we've been working on it for a while. But we're just trying to figure out the best way for us to collaborate. And those two destinations, when I do put it together, it will be for Tanzania and Zanzibar.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I can't hear Zanzibar without thinking about Olivia Pope in Scandal when she went to Zanzibar. Whatever, don't judge me. But I definitely will be looking at those too, because those definitely sound interesting. But thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your business, because this podcast is about educating people about mental health and taboo topics, but it's also about being able to create connections and grow businesses, and especially being able to kind of put things out there, and everyone can benefit from a good travel agent and being able to take that cruise, or even though you're not booking them right now, and taking those trips to the Caribbean. Those things are so important for our self-care, and you guys know that I am the self-care queen, so I'm here for everything that you're doing. But thank you so much, Mercedes, for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us and share things about crisis and self-care. And I definitely will be sharing your information within the description of this episode so that people will know how to connect with you. Thank you again. I really appreciate you taking time out. Do you have any last words for our audience?
I do not. Well, you know what I'll say. Century, say the numbers again. And you probably say them a lot, but again, quick tips: familiarize yourself with the resources that are in your area. If you have, I think one number we did not mention was 211. 211 can provide you resources if you're looking for someplace, and 211 is national, so you can use that number wherever you are. But yes, please familiarize yourself with your laws, because you got probate court. If you have a family member who's in dire need of help, that's another way to get them to force them to get help.
Order to apprehend.
Your order to apprehend. So just remember those numbers. 1-800, what is our numbers? 1-800-273-8255. That is the national number. We are, like she said, 988 will be July 16th, which was news to me. If you're in Georgia, it's 1-800-715-4225. And just familiarize yourself with your own local crisis lines.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing those tidbits. And thank you for bringing up the affidavit piece, because that's something that I actually was talking to someone a couple of days ago about and totally forgot to mention it. So thank you for not letting us slip and not add that in, because that is an important tool that a lot of people don't know about. You have to have two witnesses of someone witnessing that behavior, and you can go before a probate judge and get an order to apprehend, and they have to go pick that person up. The local sheriff department will go pick that particular person up and take them to the closest emergency receiving facility. So thank you for not letting us slip and not include that in. But for you guys who are listening, be sure to follow Mercedes Mellow Escapes LLC on IG, as well as mellowescapes.com. Make sure you guys follow her on those two items so that you guys can connect with her. Also, be sure to follow me, Tree the LPC, on all social media platforms under the handle Tree the LPC. Until next time, please take care of yourselves. Be safe and be well. Peace and love.
Bye.